Welcome to another episode of Two Guys Discussing Software.
Two Irish guys.
Two Irish guys discussing software. Yes, thank you again on episode 6 of our podcast. We're here in sunny Dublin.
It's a beautiful day.
Isn't it an absolutely beautiful day here in Dublin? We've had some fantastic weather all week. And we are here to talk about our usual topics. I'm here joined, as you can hear, by Brendan Walsh, my good friend and Global Sales Director of our organisation, as always, to talk about our favourite topics: the software industry, the company IBM, renewals, customers, the law a little bit, perhaps, but maybe shortly. We're going to be joined by Guy Tritton.
Good friend of ours.
Yes, indeed. Guy Tritton is the IP barrister from the United Kingdom, author, lecturer, so we'll have a chat with him later on. Quite appropriate. Two Irish guys being joined by Guy. Yeah. So, IBM. We always have to start with IBM. Let's talk a little bit about IBM. I have to say it. Did you see the share price movement?
Was it down?
No.
Again?
No. In fact, since we last spoke on this topic, on this show, they have had a significant movement of their share price in the last month.
Excellent.
It has moved from, for those of you in the financial world, low to mid 30s up to 141, 142. So it's a pretty nice movement. Not quite moved very far over 12 months. It's pretty flat, actually. It's about 12 months ago. It was about the same. But I thought that was pretty interesting. Obviously, they must be doing something right.
Do we know what they're doing?
Well, we know they sold their software portfolio, some of their software portfolio to HCL. We talked about that previously.
Raised a bit of cash. Yeah.
So they've raised some money. Maybe
But then they spent a lot of cash. Buying Red Hat. So
they're going to need a lot of money. Pay back whatever way they borrowed that money. I presume they couldn't have 30-odd billion
sitting in the bank.
In the bank, yes.
Probably financed it, but then they're selling off assets to raise cash, so maybe it wasn't all debt.
Yeah.
So do we know what the positive news is?
No, well, I think it's Wimbledon.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, personally I think it's Wimbledon. I mean, they've got Coco Gauff, 15-year-old tennis player, beating Venus Williams. I mean, every time I'm watching Wimbledon, I just see IBM everywhere. They're all over the news. Have you been watching Wimbledon?
I haven't, because I've been very busy. I watch other sports, but we're not going to get into that.
No, we don't do other sports. We'll do Wimbledon because.
But I did hear about the 15-year-old, and when I did, I looked at my own 15-year-old daughter and said, "What are you doing?"
Yeah,
lying on the couch.
I've stopped that.
It's pretty amazing.
I've stopped it. I was like, no, I don't do that anymore.
Yeah,
I could never.
It's not fair.
Not fair for the. We won't bring family into this. No,
we're not going to talk about snowflakes.
No. And Nick Kyrgios, I think he's Australian, is he? He's played Nadal yesterday. He's the funniest guy. I saw him actually in his previous round. It was the third round or fourth round yesterday. In his previous game, he did I think 1 or 2 underarm serves yesterday at the centre court.
My own tennis.
He does it again. against Nadal of all people. The Spanish ace.
What was he doing? Sprinting from the back of the court?
No, he just did a little thinky over the top, and he was I didn't see it coming. Yeah, no, it was been very good actually. The tennis has been excellent. So yeah, so there's been absolutely no bad news, and we're back in Dublin.
It's very positive.
We're back in Dublin. Yeah. We've been away though.
We were at ProcureCon in Denver,
and we have news from there, don't we?
We certainly do. Yeah, great show.
Oh my God.
Great show with some great people, lots of very topical conversations and workshops. I think you chaired a couple of them yourself. So
I did, thank you. I did. Yeah. It's very tricky actually, a lot of hard work. I had the first session actually was quite good. I had Matt Tucker from Barclays and Yogesh Sayanakar from BD. Future of procurement, where it's going. What I thought was really interesting, particularly with relation to our business, the titles. Change in titles. Procurement titles for senior positions in procurement, chief procurement officer, director of procurement, director of sourcing. The latest one, chief cost transformation officer. I'm looking for the chief renewals officer in that team. But yeah, I mean, this is just showing where it's going.
But it's several years ago now. I went into one of the kind of more notable Irish financial services organisations, and when I was working with them, and it's probably 10 years ago, and they were. At that stage, they were called cost management and procurement, so maybe they were ahead of the trend. But it was unusual at the time because I hadn't heard about it since, and then it's become quite topical in Denver. But actually, 10 years ago, I saw something like that evolving in the industry.
And have that company that you mentioned, without mentioning names, bought from us?
Or do they use us?
Yeah.
Unfortunately not.
Or maybe they're not doing the transformation as they should.
Well, they could have been at Denver because there was a lot of topics around areas of interest for us, such as cost savings and managing the black hole, as it was called, of renewals and so forth. So they could have learnt a lot by being in Denver.
Yeah. And we had a really good session as well then about the mega vendors and the black hole of renewals, as they was being called at the show.
Yeah, there was a lot of fighting talk in the titles. I don't know if you noticed that, but there was the black hole of renewals and the battleground and negotiations and winning the war against your vendor. So there was a lot of kind of very pugitive kind of titles.
That's interesting.
Across the stream, I just noticed that when I read the agenda. So what does that say about, it is a battle when you're in negotiations, and it's kind of seen like a fight.
Yeah.
It seemed like some of the guys on stage that you were interviewing and chairing, it was a fight, and it was all about how to protect yourself, and it wasn't about actually the relationship you should have with your vendor. The relationship was missing. It was about how to stay compliant, how not to be audited, how to win the battle, and I thought that was an interesting kind of take on the show. That was one of my big takeaways. And
this was the first time we did a pure procurement show.
Yeah,
because we normally do the software asset manager events.
We hang out with the SAM guys.
Yeah,
they're good fun, but. It was definitely a different slant on it. When we're at the software asset managers, it is much more about making sure that they're compliant and understanding their rights and entitlements and so forth. But with the procurement people, it was definitely cost saving and saving strategies. And then, as I said, winning that war was definitely kind of much more on the agenda.
Yeah. I thought Brad Veach from Walmart, who was part of the panel session, but he was great. Yeah, his presentation was outstanding. He was very good. He was a good presenter. But my main takeaway from that is he talked about how to manage 2 and 3 really low single-digit reductions, or maybe even increases. Sorry, not even reductions. How do you manage down your vendor to a 3% annual increase as opposed to a decrease? And how that, when you look at that compound over 10 years, the actual amount of money that costs. Whereas, when talking to us, it's all about, will reduce your costs year on year. So it's kind of interesting that such small numbers is what's being discussed when dealing with the mega vendors. No, it is. It's and a lot of it goes back to a topic, because we're going to be joined any second now by our eminent colleague and barrister Guy Tritton. It's rights and entitlements. And Guy, you're with us here in Dublin.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Beautiful day.
Guy, you're also known as, in our company, as the Guy.
I'm very happy to be the guy, that guy, this guy, anyway guy, however you want it.
And you've got accolades. You're a barrister, you're a specialist in intellectual property, you're an author, you're a lecturer. You've just come back from Georgia, walking...
Tabasco, my PR agent, can I say any more?
Well, we're delighted to have you here. On this topic of entitlements for our listeners, really it's like, isn't that part of the problem? Contracts, license agreements, complexity, is that where it starts and ends, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, a lot of these contracts by these big software vendors would not get plain English awards. Let's be clear about this. They're often 30 years, 40 years out of date, not dealing with current technology. That gives rise to ambiguity. Ambiguity gives rise to pressure, software audits, and sometimes one sort of can't help but thinking that this is all a little bit deliberate and intentional.
Are they sailing very close to the wind, some of these software vendors, in terms of pushing the boundaries of the law, whether it be the European Software Directive or US Copyright Act?
I think a lot of these software vendors, they like to finesse the uncertainty, entitlement to fixes, software audits, what are your licenses. It's a sort of David and Goliath situation most of the time. When you've got an ambiguity, you've got a lot of interpretation as to how these licenses works. Generally, Goliath, the software vendor, says, well, if you want to argue it further, we can. It tends to be that the licensees roll over, okay, fine, we'll do what you say. So yes, uncertainty, is it there for a good reason? I think it's there for commercial reasons.
And the audit practice?
The audit practice is really what follows on from having ambiguity. If your license isn't clear, software vendor comes in, it may be unclear as to the terms, it may be unclear as to sort of the extent of your licensing. Does it cover desktops? Does it cover mobile use? All these types of things. And yeah, that can be used to leverage you into situations you don't want to be into. For instance, getting you onto a cloud-based subscription basis.
Yeah. And Brendan was talking earlier about the event we were able to come back from Denver, and there are procurement professionals talking emotionally about getting 2 or 3% reductions in savings from these mega vendors. And obviously you know our business is about providing on average 60% saving. And one of the legal questions that often comes up in our business is, are we obliged to renew the maintenance? We have this maintenance renewal. This is the problem. The maintenance renewal has almost become, and I call it a license renewal. That's what the vendors call it. It's a trick. It's like the trick that the devil played that it doesn't exist.
They actually call it subscription.
Devil's advocate, by the way. That
subscription and support is used by IBM, for example.
Yeah.
So it feels like you're subscribing to something, and therefore you need to continue to subscribe, like your gym membership.
Yeah.
And I can't put it on pause like I can do it. Flyfit here in Dublin.
Yeah.
I have to continue to pay, otherwise I don't get anything. That's what people think.
Yeah. I mean, you can't help but thinking that there's a rather sort of deliberate obfuscation of the difference between a license, subscription, maintenance. I mean, let's be clear. You take most software vendors, legacy programs. These are perpetual licenses. When you buy a BMW car, you don't buy it for 10 years. You don't have to take it to an authorised dealer. It's yours to do or not to do as you see fit. You can take it to an authorised dealer. You can take it to an independent garage. Exactly the same as software. And you can't help but thinking that a lot of this wordplay, subscription support, is designed to sort of confuse the issue a little bit.
And are they allowed, the vendors, we see a lot of penalties and kind of back charges and just very nasty practices if you don't play by their rules. Their rules are, we want you to renew, we want you to continue to spend some outrageous amounts of money. Are they allowed to do all that?
Well, some of these practices, like if you return to us having been with somebody else, you have to pay 4 times. Pretty dubious in terms of sort of antitrust law, but I don't want to get too much into that. The fact of the matter is, like a prodigal son who returns, people are delighted to see you. They will take you and take you pretty much on the terms that you see fit. This is really all about licensee power. If you've got the right to go independent software vendor for subscription, they want your business. I wouldn't worry about it too much. The point is, and this is the take-home message, is it's perfectly legal to go to a third-party maintainer. There is absolutely 100% nothing wrong with that.
What happens if IBM tried to change the terms after the fact?
Terms of the license?
Yeah.
No, they can't. Once your license, if it's a little bit like BMW saying, I'd like the car back, please. Sorry, I bought it off you. It's mine.
So there's no way they could do that?
No way.
Yeah?
Absolutely no way at all.
Yeah, even some of those, online T's and C's. So you get your master services agreement, and inside the master services agreement there are these hyperlinks to additional clauses that exist online that can be easily edited after the fact. So I signed the paper, I send that back, but there's a link in the paper to something online which could easily be changed. Does that happen?
Yeah, I mean the law is, you've got to know what the contract is when you buy it. If you can't sort of start saying, well, it was that when you bought, 2 weeks later it's this, 4 weeks later it's that, because you're changing some hyperlink reference. That's not allowed. Often what happens, and I've seen it quite a few times, is of course these hyperlink references are changed. Not through bad faith, they just get updated. But the terms and conditions you've entered into were the terms and conditions which existed on that day when you signed. That's in concrete.
So you should print out those.
Isn't that what they were saying at ProcureCon? One of the speakers at one of the panel sessions, it was quite interesting what they said. If you should, when you sign your contract, that you download and print, have a physical copy. And they were saying that because actually they have seen, this is what they've seen, those changes. Now, whether those changes were deliberate changes or not, it doesn't really matter. They changed after the fact, went to the trouble of printing off what was behind those links.
I've seen situations when the left arm doesn't know where the right arm's doing, so some of the hyperlinks go to 404 pages. Well, print them out. If they're a 404 page, you're in good position. There are no terms and conditions on that hyperlink. You're talking about a very complex organisations, somebody, millions of employees. These things happen. Freeze it, put it in your safe, lock, throw away the key.
And if you find it's
don't throw away the key, actually. Give it to somebody.
But if you find a 404 later, and you've got a hard copy, and you've got a link that's gone, and all of the other interesting information, it's now gone. None of those clauses apply.
What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. If there were terms and conditions, but they've gone 6 months later.
Okay.
The terms and conditions which were there, that's the way it is.
One other thing that came out of ProcureCon, which is related to this, the T's and C's, and it came up, I think, when the chap from Salesforce was on stage, was when moving from on-prem to cloud, there was a strong recommendation from the panel that the end users should write their own T's and C's, and present them to the vendors and say, here are our stock SaaS cloud terms and conditions that we want to start the negotiation. Will that work? I mean, there was a lot of hands raised in ProcureCon as to how many companies had written their own T's and C's.
But there's a sort of misconception that the licensor you have to deal with on their standard T's and C's. Folks, this is a negotiation. They want your business, and if their T's and C's don't work, you put in your own T's and C's. Now, they may say, sorry, we work on our T's and C's, and you say, do you want my business or not? And then, of course, a negotiation happens there. But if your T's and C's are reasonable, make sense, and often make much more sense than the software vendor's T's and C's, I don't see any reason why you can't say to a software vendor, this is our business practice. And remember, a lot of these licensees are big companies in their own rights. You don't have to operate on a licensor's T's and C's. Common myth number 65421.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Good advice. And if you were the audience we speak to on our show, they're not lawyers. They are IT professionals. Many of them are software asset managers, work in the IT industry, maybe sometimes work in the secondary market, or procurement professionals. We hope to get some of those obviously on this as well. If you were giving advice to them, they don't live in the world of legal jargon. They don't live in the world of what they can and can't do, and in fact it can be quite fearful. What am I allowed to do? And indeed, actually, many in-house counsels, because they're probably hired to help the business, of whatever business that is, whether it is retail, as in Walmart, for example, just using the guys who were at the conference, or it's Barclays in the banking industry, whoever it might be. Their in-house counsels are specialists in the law of their industry. Now they've been asked to look at perhaps and help out in an area that they may, no matter how good they are as lawyers, be just a little bit not as up to speed on. And the people who are looking at this internally, it's kind of tricky, isn't it? If you give some advice to our listeners, what would you say to them? Where should they start, and how do they go about getting their head around this?
I think in-house counsel will often feel uncomfortable with dealing with IP licenses, software licenses, computer copyright. These are quite specialist areas. But on the other hand, if you want to get advice and you need advice, there are people you can go to. This law is not as complicated, interestingly enough, as the software vendors want you to think that it is. It's simpler. But they arbitrage your ignorance in this area to say, no, sorry, the law doesn't permit that. It's not that complicated.
Excellent.
Trust me, I wouldn't be in this field if it was.
Well, I think that's a fantastic way to end the show. Guy, as always, you have been an oracle of information, excuse the pun.
Having been against Oracle in the Supreme Court, I think I might prefer not to be thought of as that.
Well, from me and from Brendan,
It's a good night for me.
It's a good day for me, and we've had
night for me.
We will talk to you all again in a number of weeks. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, Brendan.